Here we are back again on stage. So I think we had like 3 or 4 presentations already, and we're now going over to Palle Dinesen. He's from Ubiqisense, and we're going to talk about the use of energy on people, not on empty spaces. This will also be a smart solution. Hello, Palle, how are you?
I'm good, Laura. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Yeah, first of all, I have to apologize for not being able to attend the previous presentations because we have a company offsite that was planned a long time ago. So I just jumped out of that to do my presentation. So apologies to anyone if I'm going to state things that have been said already before, not tying in with the previous presentation.
No, it's very good. So we will also share these videos because this is of course live, and we have some people online that will kind of ask some questions maybe. But we also going to record this and put this on our YouTube channels and also on LinkedIn, so people can watch it afterwards. So it's great to have you with us, Palle. Do you have a presentation with you today?
I do. Just a few slides. I like to talk more than show slides, but
cool.
I'll just share it. But you already said the most important thing, Walter, which is use energy on people and not on empty spaces. Let me just share real quick. Let me know. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, Ubiqisense. Use energy on people, not empty spaces. There you go.
Yeah. And this is, I'll start with a bit of history. I'll not bore you too much with that. But actually, when we started the company 6 years ago, what we wanted to do was to use live occupancy, people counting data from any type of room and feed it into the building management system in large buildings, and thereby helping companies to save on their energy consumption. We developed a nice solution for that. We did a nice demonstration with one of the larger BMS providers in their offices, and it worked really well. But then actually 5 years ago, at least in Denmark, which was at the time our main market, there was really very little interest for saving money on energy in big office buildings, unfortunately. And so we've done in the meantime a lot around workspace management, space management, and helping companies reduce space that they need. And now, on the other side of COVID, hopefully we are on the other side, but at least things seems to be on that front a bit back to normal. What we're seeing is that it's actually now a twofold proposition, because with the energy prices that I'm sure have already been mentioned many times this morning, there's a completely different focus now on saving energy, and at the same time the reality in offices around the world has changed dramatically. So I was looking at some numbers yesterday that came out from the British Council for Offices. They came out with a Future of Offices Density report, and basically what they were showing was that the average occupancy in offices has gone down dramatically since before the pandemic, and that's of course all attributed to the hybrid way of working that we're now in, and so because of that they are changing. They're changing their recommendations for the office space per employee, and in Denmark we have now a national strategy for sustainable buildings, and that has stipulated that at some point we need to be at CO2 equivalent emissions of 12 kilograms per square meter per year. And that would be the equivalent of having 7.5 square meters per employee in offices. And today, as an example, in Copenhagen, that number is 41 square meters. So today, in offices in Copenhagen, there's on average 41 square meters per employee. And this is, of course, a huge reduction that needs to happen. And I think if you do it the right way and combine these numbers with, or combine these facts with the fact that people do not come to the office 100% more today as they used to do before Corona, then obviously there's a tremendous savings potential, both on direct energy savings, but also by adapting the building to the actual needs of the employees. And just to top that off, I also came across some Leesman data with a big study, I think around 3,000 respondents, saying that they now see big variations across the week on office attendance. So that on average, and this is a global number, on average on Mondays you have 30% of people coming to the office. Tuesday through Thursday, it's close to a bit above 40%, and on Friday it drops down to only 20%. So obviously there's a huge savings potential if you can tap into reducing energy consumption based on how people actually, excuse me, use their offices. And so we've been looking at this, and so we sort of dusted off our old proposition around integration with building management systems. And I've taken here an example of a meeting room in the co-working space where we have our offices. And basically we looked at using our people counting sensors. We looked at the occupancy in this particular meeting room by the name of Rome through the month of June this year. And so this first graph shows the number of hours this room has been in use on each and every day throughout that month. And you can see there's quite a big variation from certain, so of course on the weekends, on most of the weekends, nobody has been in there. On other days, typically on Fridays, it's around a few hours every day. And then the peak is about one day with 11 hours of that room being in use. So now we know that the use of a room varies quite a bit. But if we then also take into account the number of people inside that room. So not only looking at when it's in use or not in use, but also looking at when there are people in the room, how many people are there. And that's basically what we see here on the second graph is that, 50%, roughly 50% of the time, the room is idle, excuse me, there's no one in there. Then around 20% of the time, there's only one person in this room, which is, by the way, a 10-person meeting room. So about 20% of the time, only one person. Another 20% of the time, there'll be two people inside the room, and then a few, like 10%, three people, and then a few with 4, 5, and 6, 7 people. But you have to bear in mind that this is a 10-person meeting room. And so when you look at the average space utilization, or the average number of people inside that room when it's actually in use, it's maybe around 2, a little more than 2, and it's a 10-person meeting room. And now keep in mind that ventilation, lighting in that room basically runs all day during working hours. So a lot of money goes into illuminating room and ventilating the room for no good, excuse me, for no good reason. When we look at the energy consumption when it's unadjusted, we have lighting, which accounts for about 1,200 kilowatt hours per year, and on top of that, we have ventilation, which accounts for about 350 kilowatt hours per year. And this is, the typical use scenario of the light being on all day. And then the ventilation being run at 100% all day. Now, if we look at, using a people counting sensor that we have to A, control the light, but then B, also to control the ventilation based on the number of people inside the room, there's actually a really big savings potential that can be accomplished, on the lighting and ventilation combined, for a single room like that, 10-person room like that, we can see potential saving up to 1,250 kilowatt hours per year. and that amounts to quite a bit of money. And this is even for Danish electricity prices at the moment, quite a conservative number. And so you have to imagine all these big buildings that we see every day that are constantly illuminated, and the ventilation, is run on a schedule that makes the ventilation start in the morning at, say, I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock, and then runs until 6 or 7 in the evening, without any consideration for the number of people in the building, or the number of people in any of the rooms in that building. So it's a really big savings potential that can be accomplished by understanding where people are using the building and how they're using that building. And just actually looking then at a bigger picture, this is an example from a different customer of ours. It's a large corporate office in Copenhagen. It's an office with a capacity for 750 people. And this is then occupancy measured by our people counting sensors throughout the building. And I've taken 2 random weeks, consecutive weeks in September. So the first one is then from, I guess, 12th to 16th of September, and you can see the variation across the week. On the left, you see the Monday. So the Monday on the 1 week is around 350 people showing up in that 750 people office. Tuesday it goes up, Wednesdays it wears a little bit, and then for this week, by coincidence, if you will, or because of the way people work, Friday is the day that has the most people actually come to the office. Then we take the next week, and the picture is actually completely different. There are more people coming in on the Monday than in the previous week, and then it varies. And then on the Friday in that week, that's where there's least people in the building. So this data, and I could show you week after week after week, and show you how basically, I wouldn't say random, but erratic that turnout is in that particular office. And I think it's a pattern that we see across many of our existing customers. And so one of the things that this customer actually immediately realized was that people show up for work later than anticipated, and they actually leave the office also quite a bit earlier than they anticipated when they were sort of programming the building management system. And so one immediately saving that they did was to, based on our numbers from the people counting sensors, was to start the ventilation half an hour later and stop it half an hour earlier in the day. And so that immediately saved them around 30,000 kilowatt hours per year. So an immediate saving that could be accomplished. But then one of the next things that we're looking at is, what if we take a more radical approach to the way that we use the office? So today, typically any big office building, you will run the energy sources in the building based on a fixed schedule, so that as in this case, the ventilation will start say 7 a.m. in the morning, and then stop at 6 p.m. in the afternoon. Same for the heat. You will depending on the season, of course, the time of the year, you will start the heating at some point to make sure that the whole 15,000 square meters of this office are properly heated when the first person shows up to work at, say, 7 a.m. in the morning. And then you will turn off the heat at some point in the evening. Same, of course, with if you have air conditioning in the building, and that's being used, and then of course also with the lighting, you'll typically just illuminate that building throughout the day, and really operate the building as if it was always full of people. And if we take this building as an example, right, you can see again, it's a 750 capacity building. So at peak there can be up to there's 750 people working in this office. But for these two consecutive weeks, you can see that the maximum amount of people at any time during those 2 weeks is actually 558 people, which was on a Friday afternoon, which might indicate that they had some sort of event where a lot of people were coming in. But again, that number is only roughly 2/3 or a little more, maybe 3/4 of the maximum capacity of the building, yet it's still operated as if it's full of people every day, Monday through Friday. So we started looking at what could actually be achieved if we look at using the office in a more radical way. So who is to say that, you know, people need to have their fixed desk at the 7th floor that they go to every single day, but when that first person shows up in the morning at 8 o'clock, he or she will be the only person on that entire floor. And then you might have, you know, 5 people on the 5th floor and whatnot, you know, in terms of number of people on the different floors throughout the building. That is for sure not a very efficient way to use the energy in that specific building. So what if we looked at a more radical approach of saying, you know, we know based on seasonality, based on the day of the week, and based on how people generally come to the office, and just to show you this, you know, the top graph here shows on 2 different days. So one in mid-July, which is typical vacation season in Denmark, and then mid-August when everyone is back from vacation. So obviously the turnout in the building on those 2 different days will and were quite different. So, you know, people start showing up in the morning, that's no surprise. And then in Denmark, most people probably come into the office between say 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and then they start, you know, gradually leaving 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But obviously for these 2 days, the turnout is extremely different. And at none of the 2 days are we anywhere close to actually filling that building with people. And yet it's run as if it's full of people every single day throughout the work week. So what if we take a more radical approach to how we use buildings? And I think, you know, and I'm sure this number again has already been mentioned quite a few times today already, but that 20% of the global energy consumption that is used on operating buildings, if we are to reduce that number, we have to take a more radical approach to how we use buildings. Not only do we have to right size the space that we have per employee, and based on the number of employees in our company, but we also have to look at other different ways that we can use that energy in a smarter way. So as we say, use energy on people and not on empty spaces. And so, you know, what if we were to say, if you get into the office between say 7 and 8 a.m. in the morning, we kindly ask you that you go and work on the first floor, because that's the one where we started the heating if it's in the winter, early enough that floor is actually warm at 7 o'clock in the morning. But then and please don't go to the 4th or the 5th or the 6th floor, because we're not actually properly operating those floors until a bit later, like say 10 o'clock in the morning, when we have the maximum number of people in the building. So we looked a little bit what would be the potential energy savings based on actually doing that. And so the lower graph here shows what might actually be accomplished there. So the solid or the dark red shows the kilowatt hours used per day for lighting, heating, and ventilation in that building, and without doing anything. And then comparatively, what could be achieved if we ask or change the way that we used to use the building in such a way that, you know, we fill sort of the building gradually, and thereby only when the office is at peak, you know, that's when we start to use energy throughout the building. And so on a low attendance day, such as in July, as shown, you know, as much as 43% of that energy can be saved, and on a busy day in that building, save as much as 29% of that energy. And so that's I know to some it really sounds radical, but if we look at some of the goals around sustainability, I mentioned the one that we have in Denmark before, where the CO2 equivalent needs to be reduced to 12 kilograms per square meter per year, and that would amount to having roughly 7.5 square meters per employee. Then we really need to look at more radical ways of how we use the offices. And when we discuss this with clients and potential clients, initially there's some pushback around this, but then obviously as people start to think about it, I think more and more people are realizing that this is we can't just save, we cannot save the planet by making fewer trips by airplane and eating less red meat. We have to do something about some of these really big energy consumers, like the buildings that we work in every day. And we believe that understanding how people use these spaces is a key to starting reducing some of that energy consumption. And then what I wanted to say was also that it's on the other hand also really important that the building will cater to the needs of its users, because what we're also seeing with clients is that a lot of big companies are quite desperate to get employees back to the office. And that means that they need to offer, sort of the type of facility that will meet those needs of the users. And that's again also a big shift from before the pandemic, where a company would say, this is the facility that we have at your disposal. As an employee, as a group, as a team, you need to fit into that facility. That doesn't work anymore, because then people just stop showing up in the offices if they don't like the way that things are working at the office. And so here on the other side of COVID, really what we're seeing is that companies are desperately seeking knowledge and understanding of how can they cater to the needs of the users. And then at the same time, you really have to start looking at the energy reductions. And it may sound like a conundrum that's really difficult to solve, but I think understanding truly how people use all detailed kind of spaces in and around buildings is the key to resolving some of those issues, so that we can achieve these two goals simultaneously, at least to some degree. So that's really what we're pursuing actively now with a number of big existing and prospective clients, is that having that detailed daily understanding, getting those actionable insights, is the information that we can feed into the building management system, so we can do real-time adjustments of the energy consumption, but then also looking at the bigger picture in order to really look at the trends and see, well, how can we change things on a more permanent or long-term basis, so that we can help reduce the energy consumption even further by understanding truly how people use the buildings. So I'm not going to, yeah. So I think that's really the key message that I want to get out there. And then maybe some challenges that I want to point out is that when we talk to large companies, they are struggling to work with the BMS providers, because the BMS providers, I'm not going to name any names, but they're notoriously closed around their systems and not really opening up to using data such as ours to really help drive down the energy consumption in bigger buildings. We do see some trends around that of some of these players starting to understand that that this will be a requirement of the customers and the big enterprises. And if they don't do something about this, you know, people will find ways around it. So I'm hopeful that this will change, but I think it's important to stress that certain things needs to open up around these BMS providers. I think that basically sort of sums up what I wanted to talk about today, Walter.
Very interesting. So that last part that you were talking about the difficulty to get the industry moving.
Yeah.
How come? Because the solutions are there, the needs are there, you would say, but how come is it that is that difficult for the industry to adapt?
I think it's all around the business and business models. And if you look at some of these BMS providers, they're traditionally hardware companies, and the business model they've built around this is around selling hardware and closed systems that they really control. And you know, if they start opening up and look at different business models, that's going to be disruption. And you know, disruption can be challenging if you're a big consolidated company. So we see so many different kind of workaround solutions around this. But in my humble opinion, you know, these companies really need to wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah, and who is the one that is going to wake up these companies? Is that the real estate owner? Is it the tenant? Who is that?
I think it's the real estate owners, and I know for a fact that certain big real estate owners in the Nordics, and obviously I can't name any names because this is sensitive, right? But they've basically told
nobody hears it here. Nobody.
They have told some of these BMS providers that you know, we're not gonna work with you anymore unless you open up here. So the real estate owners, they have the muscle, right? Because you know, they're so I think that's where it needs to come from.
And where do you see this is happening right now? Is it the Nordics? Is it Europe? Is it UK? Is it US? Is it Asia, Middle East, maybe?
We see a lot of things for us happening in the Nordics, because I think the Nordics has always been sort of front runners on sustainability and energy savings. And then we also have a lot of traction now in the Middle East because they obviously use a lot of money on air conditioning. And if they can do something around that, that's gonna be huge cost savings for them as well. Yeah,
I believe so too. Yeah, last week I was in New York, and we had a lot of discussions on who is running in front, and also there it was like the US is laying behind like 3 or 4 years. And the Nordics also there, the Scandinavian countries, they are far ahead of everybody else. So yeah, it's good to have you with us, and it's good to have you share your insight, because that's really valuable for a lot of people.
Good. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Palle, and hope to see you next time as well.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I could have stayed, but again, we're in the middle of this company offsite, so I have to skip that. But have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.